I mean, I do think that Nike's culture is a big part of its reason for success.
Hello and welcome. In 1963, Phil Knight co-founded Nike under the name Blue Ribbon Sports with a $500 investment from his former track coach, Bill Bowerman. He made his first sales by going to track meets and selling the shoes from the trunk of his Plymouth Valiant. Now Nike is a multinational corporation worth over $34 billion. Starting a business today is a lot different than it was in the 1960s. When Phil Knight started Nike, he told his 20-year-old sister to go to City Hall and get a license. There were no accountants and no lawyers involved. In some ways, though, Knight thinks starting a business today can be easier. He said his biggest struggles growing the Nike brand were not having enough money.
Entrepreneurs go to lunch, they all go off by themselves. That's me.
Since venture capital firms didn't provide funding then like they do today. However, despite a lack of money, Phil Knight doesn't think success is all about money. In his Shoe Dog memoir, he says, "When it came in, the money affected us all. Not much, and not for long, because none of us were driven by money. But that's the nature of money. Whether you have it or not, whether you want it or not, whether you like it or not, it will try to define your days. Our tasks as human beings is to not let it."
And I guess that's one thing that's shown in the book. And I think you really have to have a passion about it, and you have to have a reason to succeed.
He began his career like most ordinary college grads. No money, no clear direction, and what looked like a lifetime at a desk job as an accountant. What transpired instead was one of the greatest stories of American entrepreneurship. First called Blue Ribbon Sports, Knight's business began on a whim when he convinced a group of Japanese businessmen to export their popular Tiger sneakers and grant him exclusivity in selling them. After selling Tigers out of the trunk of his car, Knight saw the demand was there. It wasn't always a smooth ride. Despite Knight doubling his sales constantly, banks were reluctant to provide the loans needed, and 2 banks ultimately dropped him as a customer. After years of strong growth, but with struggles to stay in the black, Knight and his team decided in December of 1980 to finally take Nike public.
Well, sportswear and shoes and clothes is still a fairly significant part of our business.
"We were concerned about losing control," said Knight, who added that ultimately it was one of the best things the company ever did. Knight's advice to other entrepreneurs: be prepared for a lot of hardship and unexpected setbacks.
When we started out, the total branded athletic shoe sales in the United States were about $2 billion. So last year we did 9. And so based on the original year, we're 450% market share. So it's, we took advantage of the running boom, which became a jogging boom, which became a fitness boom, and we've benefited from all of that. Well, what I've always said is we're a marketing company, and the product is our most important marketing tool. If there's one thing, it's been, I've been pretty good at evaluating people. And that was one of the things that I wanted to get through, and I hope did come through in the book, was how valuable those early, partners were, my fellow employees, my teammates. 25 words or less, a shoe dog is somebody that really loves shoes. And that was me, that I was a runner. There's no such thing as a ball in the mile, that all you really care about are the shoes. And so that became important to me, and it's been with me ever since. I summed it up in the book that way. But most people thought it was crazy. That I know when it finally got going a little bit, why people around Portland, Oregon, which is kind of a small city atmosphere in a larger city, they said, "Phil Knight, he's got a Stanford MBA and he's selling Japanese sneakers." And so most people thought it was crazy, but I didn't think it was crazy. And the good thing was my college professor that I wrote the paper for didn't think it was crazy. Well, my first sport was baseball, but I got cut from the baseball team, and we were talking earlier before about the coincidences in life. I was the last guy cut on a 25-man team. Just think if I'd have made that team, where would we be today? So basically, I get on weekends and in the evenings, and I go out to high schools and I say, I've got this great shoe, and it's at a good price and it's a good value, and you should have your kids buy it. And then someone would place orders there, and someone would walk in at ring the doorbell at 7 or 8 o'clock at night, and my father would be watching TV, and there'd be a kid trying on a pair of shoes in his living room, and he was quite surprised at the whole thing, but intrigued as well. You go out 20 years or so and you haven't been back for a while, and you come back and it's more about just sharing a moment with family and friends. It's for a moment you step back in history and remember when you had all the world laying out before you and you decided the things that you were going to find important. And it was really the start of you becoming what you ultimately became. When I come back, for just a moment, I always hear the voice of Frank Schallenberger, Bob Davis, Jim Porterfield. And I know that sounds sort of corny to an educated group, but I promise you that over half the people in this room, when they come back here 20 years from now, will have those same feelings. For me, it was, I was the guy that thought an extrovert was the person that stared at other people's shoes. It was a time for me to kind of grow and chase what I was really going to become. And so it was really a big transitional period for me in my life. And as I say, to this day when I come back, I still get inspired and lifted up.
So basically we were relying on banks, and the banks, you had to put the money up before you could import the shoes, so you were kind of a reverse leverage situation. It's the opposite of buying a house where you can live in the house before it's paid for. So the banks had to loan us the money to get the shoes in, and they became apprehensive about their collateral was track shoes, and what if they have to collect? They're going to pile them up in the lobby of the bank. And so it was difficult getting financing, and it was very important that we make profit every year, and so they would give us a little more loan each year, which they did. And that was the process. And we pushed the envelope pretty hard since we got kicked out of 2 banks for being too aggressive. But ultimately, a Japanese trading company, Nissho Iwai, they were not bound by really kind of the same rules that U.S. banks were. They could charge more interest, and that was fine with us. We were interested in volume. And so we got hooked up with them, and that really allowed us to grow fast.